you, I beseech you to pick up that phone and call now to see what your case could be worth.
800-922-5779.
Free TV starts with Local Now. With hundreds of free TV channels,
these are the big cases that everyone is talking about.
Local news in hundreds of cities.
Good evening. Thanks for joining us here on NBC6.
And thousands of movies and shows. It's time to do free differently. Local Now, free TV that starts in your city.
The National Hurricane Center has released the postseason analysis for Hurricane Melissa. Perhaps the main highlight is increasing Melissa's maximum wind speed to 190 miles per hour, now tying it for the strongest hurricane on record in the Atlantic Basin based on wind speeds.
And Alex, we knew, I think, when Melissa was reaching its peak and the night before it did, looking at a variety of data sources, this might even be stronger. So I don't think it's a complete surprise that the Hurricane Center bumped up the numbers. So there's two statistics to highlight here. One, what you just mentioned, is that Melissa is tied with Allen for the strongest hurricane on record in the Atlantic Basin. But remember, that peak occurred a few hours before landfall. So Melissa still made landfall at 185 miles an hour, but that puts it on par with Dorian of 2019 and the Labor Day hurricane of 1935. Those are the three strongest hurricanes at the time of landfall at 185 miles an hour.
So we're looking at two statistics with this. The peak strength matching the highest intensity that we saw, and then actually what it was at landfall. That still kept it in the top spot.
Yeah, so Melissa is the strongest hurricane to make landfall anywhere in the Atlantic Basin since Dorian of 2019, and both of them making landfall in island environments. And Dorian was not only Cat 5 when it came ashore there in the Abacos, and it was barely moving. So at least Melissa was moving along.
Right, but we watched this thing, knowing what we had seen there in Dorian, knowing what we could see on satellite, and of course from our advisories, we knew we were in for quite the storm, a devastating hit there in western Jamaica.
Yeah, and Melissa's trek across western Jamaica not only caused damage and loss of life, nearly 100 people, but the aftermath has been terrible.
Yeah.
The agricultural impacts, the water supply being contaminated, causing a lot of infectious disease in the weeks after. So we don't really know how many people we have lost in total when you consider the direct and the indirect impacts of this major hurricane top end in terms of landfall intensity in the Atlantic record.
Now explain to us, the benefits of doing these postseason analysis. What are the Hurricane Center forecasters looking at that would have them make those alterations?
Well, you have to look at all of the available data, and there are two main sources of data when you're trying to ascertain hurricane intensity. The obvious one is the satellite. We can see how the pattern changes as a hurricane is rapidly intensifying. But we also have, in the Atlantic Basin, the hurricane hunters from NOAA and the Air Force. And we had both sources of data as Melissa was intensifying. But what the satellite estimate tells you and what the aircraft tells you often are in conflict. And they're two very different kinds of data.
Yeah, the hurricane hunters, of course, gave us some spectacular views. It's not all about the views, as you point out. They're giving us data, but they're also sampling. It's not representative every little moment or area of the storm.
Yeah, we don't have aircraft everywhere in the storm. We don't have a two-dimensional picture of the winds from the aircraft. And when you are the forecaster on duty at the Hurricane Center in real time, these are the advisory numbers as Melissa was strengthening up until landfall. You only have the information up until the time you have to issue the advisory. And one thing that's different after the fact is, well, you can look at what the aircraft showed a few hours later, what the satellite became a few hours later, and then kind of piece together what happened. And so in the post-analysis, one thing they do is they kind of smooth through the bumps in the advisory values when you have less data and less time to pour through it all.
Well, and you've got the, like you said, the benefit of time, the hindsight is 2020 aspect. That little bump at the very end, though, that's the big difference here. So we do have that small spike.
We do, and everything, once it got near and above the Cat 5 threshold, they've been revised upward, mainly because the satellite estimates continued to go higher and higher, and the satellite estimates said it was this strong, the aircraft said it was this strong. They had to kind of make a compromise and pour through and quality control the aircraft data, and they decided to up the intensity when the satellite signal peaked, even though we didn't have aircraft everywhere, like you say. But that happened before landfall. But then as it was making landfall, the aircraft and the satellite signal said it was still 185, like we said operationally. But here's the thing that I will always take away from Melissa, in addition to the impacts. You compare it to Dorian and Michael and Otis, the recent Cat 5 hurricanes at landfall that the Hurricane Center's done forecasts for. The forecasts for track and intensity for this landfall in Cat 5 were the best they've ever been.
Yeah, so hats off to the National Hurricane Center. Thanks, Dr. Knapp.